Imagine, just for a second, crossing a freezing ocean in an open wooden boat and doing it 500 years before Columbus. Sounds impossible, right? But according to sagas and archaeology, that's exactly what the Vikings may have done. So today, let's explore this question. Did the Vikings really discover America first? And what did they actually find there? The story of the Vikings and their legendary journeys begins with the Icelandic sagas, ancient tales passed down through generations, finally written on parchment by medieval scribes. These sagas are more than just stories. They are a unique blend of history, myth, and cultural memory, capturing the spirit of a people who lived on the edge of the known world. These medieval texts weave together real events and legendary feats, blurring the line between fact and fiction. They were often recited aloud in smoky longhouses, their words echoing through the centuries, shaping how we remember the Viking Age. One of the most famous figures in these sagas is Leif Erikson, the adventurous son of Eric the Red. Around the year 1000 AD, the sagas tell us, Leif set out from Greenland, driven by curiosity and the promise of new lands. According to these stories, Leif sailed west across the cold, unpredictable seas, and eventually landed in a mysterious place he called Vinland, a land that seemed almost magical to the Norse explorers. Vinland was described as a place of wild grapes, dense forests, and fresh, clear water. A stark contrast to the harsh landscapes of Greenland and Iceland, it was a land of abundance, at least in the stories. But as we listen to these tales, we have to ask ourselves, just how much of this is true? How reliable are these stories really? After all, the sagas were not written down until about 200 years after the events they describe. By then, details could have been lost, changed, or even invented. Some elements of the sagas might reflect real memories of exploration and discovery, preserved through generations of storytelling. But others could be the result of exaggeration, imagination, or the desire to entertain, larger-than-life adventures that grew with every retelling, leaving us to wonder where history ends and legend begins. For centuries, historians and explorers alike debated whether Vinland, the legendary land described in Norse sagas, was a real place or simply a myth. The stories spoke of a distant land across the Atlantic, rich with resources and wild landscapes, but for generations there was no concrete proof to support these tales. Then, in the early 1960s, a husband and wife team of archaeologists, Helga and Anne Stein-Ingstad, made a discovery that would change history. Their search led them to the windswept tip of Newfoundland, where local stories hinted at ancient ruins. At Meadows, they uncovered the unmistakable remains of Viking-style houses built from turf and wood, just as described in the sagas. These structures were unlike anything built by indigenous peoples or later European settlers. Among the ruins, they found iron nails and a bronze cloak pin, artifacts that could only have been made by skilled Norse craftsmen, providing physical evidence of a Viking presence. Even more remarkably, they discovered signs of a ship repair workshop, including wooden fragments and iron rivets, suggesting that the Vikings not only landed here but also maintained their vessels for further exploration. Using radiocarbon dating, scientists determined that these artifacts and structures dated to around the year 1000 AD, almost exactly when the sagas claimed the Norse had reached new lands. Today, Meadows stands as the only confirmed Viking site in North America, offering a tangible link to the legendary voyages of the Norse and forever changing our understanding of early exploration. The story of the Vikings and their journey across the Atlantic is one of history's most fascinating tales. But did the Vikings truly discover America? That question is more complicated than it might seem at first glance. Well, it depends on what you mean by discover. If you're asking whether the Vikings were the first people to ever set foot in North America, the answer is no. But if you mean the first known Europeans to make the journey, then yes, they were. Indigenous peoples had lived in the Americas for thousands of years before any Europeans arrived. Their civilizations, cultures, and histories stretch back millennia, with rich traditions and deep connections to the land. These were thriving societies long before the first Viking sail appeared on the horizon. The Vikings, led by explorers like Leif Erikson, made their way to the shores of what is now Newfoundland, Canada, around the year 1000. They established small settlements and interacted with the local peoples. They stayed for perhaps a decade, maybe a little more, but they didn't manage to set up a lasting colony. Their settlements were eventually abandoned, and the Norse presence in North America faded into legend for centuries. Now, Columbus's voyages, which happened nearly 500 years later, actually led to widespread European exploration and colonization. His journeys marked the beginning of a new era, one that would reshape the world in profound ways. So in a sense, the Vikings were the first known Europeans to set foot in North America, a remarkable achievement for their time, showing incredible courage and seafaring skill. But they definitely weren't the first people here. The land was already home to diverse and vibrant indigenous cultures, whose stories and legacies continue to shape the continent to this day. According to the sagas, the Vikings clashed with the local people. They called them Skraelings, possibly ancestors of the Beothuk or other indigenous groups. The Vikings, being small in number, found it hard to trade or fight, Isolation, harsh winters and danger eventually drove them back to Greenland. So did the Vikings really discover America first? Well, yes, they reached North America around the year 1000 AD, but they weren't the first people here, and they didn't build a permanent colony. Still, their story shows just how far curiosity and courage can take us, even 1,000 years ago. If you enjoyed this journey through history, don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment below. Which ancient explorer should we cover next? See you in the next video.